Welcome to another short LodeStar workshop. Today we're going to design a very simple decision-making scenario. And we'll choose a topic, we'll call it simple backwards design. And I'll explain the purpose of this in a moment. So right now, LodeStar is creating a folder called Simple Backwards Design. It's placing all the ingredients in that folder. And the purpose of this project, the purpose of this activity, is really to create a simple decision-making scenario or activity in response to some instruction related to the principle, the concept of backwards design. So, the meaning of backward design is going to become apparent. I don't necessarily need to describe it at length right now, but it'll be apparent as we go along. And you can kind of see the principle reveal itself as we build an activity. The most important piece right now is just to understand that we've provided some instruction. Maybe it was through an online medium. We provided some instruction on what it means to design in a backwards fashion. And now we simply want to put our students in a situation where they have to make some decisions and draw upon that knowledge. That's all we're trying to do. So we're in LodeStar, and I think the key here is really to understand the mechanics of how you create a decision-making scenario within LodeStar. So we're on page 1 of 1. We can see that here, and we can see that this is a text type. So there, we have a variety of page types, and this one happens to be text, and we can see that with the icon. We'll go ahead and give it page ID. We should always provide a page ID, and in this case, we'll add it to the table of contents. Now, in order for us to, I think what we're trying to do now is just create a very, very simple title page. And I'll use SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics Editor. I'll go in here and choose my text tool, type in course design. I'll enlarge that. So this is a scalable vector graphic, and it's simple text. And now we'll type the word backwards. Make that a little larger. And let's have some fun with it. We'll go ahead and do something like that. Change its color. Terrific. Course design backwards. And I'll save it to a page. Now, when I click on this graphic, we'll notice right away that it was kind of given a canvas width and height of 960 by 450. Well, that's not responsive. That's a fixed width, a fixed height. So we'll go ahead and make that 100%. You'll see that it's gotten smaller because essentially 100% in this case includes that white canvas that was part of our SVG graphic. This is good for now. We'll add a page. So you click on the plus, and LodeStar always creates a page based on the preceding page. So this is, again, another page using the text type, text page type. So here, what we'll do now is provide a little bit of a presentation. So we'll provide some content. We'll change our page type to video. So you can imagine that we've gone off to YouTube, found a great short presentation on backwards design. We copy the URL from the address bar, paste it in. And that's all we need to do here. We'll call this video. Add that to our table of contents. Now we'll add a page. And of course, we get another video page, which is not what we want. We want text. Now this particular page is going to serve as an instruction page. So we'll add instructions, table of contents, and let's add a graphic. Go ahead and hit the little image tool. We'll get image from our hard drive, and we'll use this graphic. Do we want to optimize? Yes, we do. And we usually do, unless we're using an animated GIF, in which case we don't want LodeStar to resample that image or change it in any way. So we brought that in, and we'll make that roughly 30% of our screen width. Now, if we simply hit OK, you can see what's happened. So we have this block here and we have this block here, but I would rather have the text flow around it. So I'll click on this again and hug that to the left align it, and we're good. Could even type in the word instructions here. That'll help. We'll change this from a paragraph to heading 2. We're good. Table of contents, instructions. Let's add a page. I'm going to save here. I have a habit of frequently saving. Now, later on, we'll come back. So we'll get right into our decision-making scenario, but we'll come back and insert a page type, but it'll be meaningless for us to discuss that now. So we'll come back and insert. What we'll do is just jump into a specific page type called the interview page. Now, the interview page allows us, allows us to bring in a character image. This is what the character, we type in what the character says, and then these are the responses that the learner would make based on the situation. And we'll assign a meter value, so we can indicate which response is the best response, which is kind of a mediocre response, and maybe which is the poor response. All of these get randomized when there's playback. Now, I'm going to bring in an image, kind of a neutral image of this gentleman named Hector. We'll use him. And essentially, Hector would like you to, Hector is a very humble person. He has a position of authority in this particular scenario, and he's asking the learners to, he essentially says, I would like you to design a course that will help teachers advance their use of technology in the classroom. Now, in backwards design, the whole point of backwards design is you really should be thinking first about, about the learners and their needs, and establishing some outcomes, some goals for the activity, and then creating an assessment. How would you even go about, how would you know that they achieved those goals? Now, that could be an authentic assessment. It doesn't necessarily have to be a quiz. It could be a scenario. It could be a decision-making scenario, some way of assessing the learner's knowledge in this particular area. So here are some possible choices. The first one, who are the students? What needs do they have? And the second one is, what sorts of technologies, just kind of, what sorts of technologies do we use in our course? And we know from backwards design that the media it just comes way down the road because you really need to learn something about your students first, and then establish some outcomes. That's a great place to start. Jumping into technologies and content is probably not the best place. So we can start to assign these things some values. So who are the students? That's probably the best answer. What sorts of technology do we use? Well, eventually, it's not a wrong answer. It's just kind of misplaced. It's not the first thing we would ask. So we can allow for, gray area for responses that are not quite perfect, but they're adequate. And now the total number of points for this particular decision is going to be 5. That's the most you can get. In addition to that, we definitely want to put in we want a page ID. That's very helpful. The other part that we want to do is start to, we can put in some branch options here. We can start putting in some feedbacks, such as, you know, this is a great question to ask. Might be something that we would type in. Now, branch immediately, we don't have to worry about that. In this branch option, in this dialog, the only thing we're doing is showing feedback. With branch options, there's a whole variety of things that can happen. And we're not concerned about that right now. We simply want to show some immediate feedback based on the choice. And we can do the same thing here. What sorts of technologies? And, we might be affirming here is saying, that is a good question, but probably not the first thing to ask. Now, this is a little bit arbitrary, but don't worry about that. What's more important is just the mechanics of how you do this. And then here, choice of technology and media come much later. You're just providing some instructive feedback here. Ultimately, we're going to allow our learners to retry, to try to get the best score that they can. So this feedback will be very beneficial to them. Great. Hector, right now he has this kind of neutral expression. And what we'll do a little later is maybe add a little pizzazz to this and change this expression based on the answer. And I'll demonstrate that in a moment. So now I'll go ahead and hit the plus, and here, we do want to create another. So here you can see how it's helpful that a new page defaults to the previous page type, because we're all set to go. We can start to go ahead and now in response to our choice in the background. So in the previous question, in response to that, Hector says this: the students are K-12 teachers who want to expand their use of technology in the classroom. So he's volunteering that information. Now, you could have constructed this so the only way that you see this information is if you would have made the right choice. In other words, you could have branched to this particular page, but we're keeping things very simple. We're keeping things very linear. So I'm not too concerned about a decision-making scenario that goes off in all kinds of different branches. We're trying to keep this simple. And in the interest of simplicity, we'll go ahead and pick, we're not changing his expression here. We'll just keep the same thing going. Now I have some additional questions. What do we want these teachers to do as a result of the course? And then our second option is, what are the outcomes and objectives of the course? And our third option would be, what topics should the course cover? So these two are rather good answers. This is probably the best. What do we want them to do? But this is pretty valid. I could give that a 4. I'll do a 3 for now, but I could have given it a 4. It's a pretty good question to ask. And this is a lot weaker. Getting to the topics, we haven't established those outcomes yet. So in backwards design, this is probably a poor thing to ask. And of course, we could go ahead and provide all of our feedback. We could just click on, remember to always click on feedback and put your feedback. Put it right here with this checked. You don't have to worry about this. No action, just leave this alone. And I could, I'm not going to repeat myself, but I could do that for all of these. I'll go ahead and create one more response and one more set of options here. So Hector explains, after completing the course, learners should be able to list the technologies available to them and understand the value of each technology to the student. So that's useful information. And then of course, our next question is, how will we know that the students have mastered the objectives? So right away, getting into the question of assessment. And then these other things are distractors. They're not the best thing to ask. So once again, we'll kind of weight these. The best answer will give us 5 points. So far we could have earned, if we did this perfectly, we would have earned 15 points, which is great. I'll go ahead and save. Bring in neutral Hector. And we're good to go. Now, so far what we have is, if we previewed, we don't have, we haven't done any reporting. We get this very simple, minimalist, vanilla display, and we'll change that as well. We'll change the layout of this. So right now, this is bringing in all the assets. There's our course design. That's our SVG graphic. Here's our table of contents. And, a video will appear. And then we have our instructions. We've got modest Hector there, and this is what he says, and these are our options. So if I answered this, who are the students? That was the perfect answer. Here's my feedback. And then you can see that the meter is full here. Now it rolls back because now we're really accountable now for 10 points. So we've gotten 5 out of 10 so far because we haven't yet answered this question. That's why this kind of rolled back. And the intention here is, whenever you do something positive, is to get that, reinforce that with the meter. Now you can exclude the meter. You do not have to have the meter. I can show you where you can remove that. But so right now, let's answer something poorly. So we got a little bit of we got our 1 point there, but you can see we definitely do not have a 10 out of 10. And of course that rolls back. After completing the course, so which would we answer? And we can go ahead and do this. So we get this. So we haven't done very well, and we're at the end. Now what we'll do is we'll really give folks, the learners, a chance to do this over again, improve their scores. So in other words, we're keeping this really simple, but we're getting them to repeat so that they can try to get the best score that they can. We'll add a page, and this page will be the report page type. The function of this page, the whole point of this page, is simply to report to the learning management system. We don't even have to necessarily type anything in here, because LodeStar will fill this in automatically. But we can label our page or give ourselves a page ID here. And if we hit this page, sometimes for some learning management systems, it really helps to terminate, to cut off communications with the learning management system as soon as you've reported. What that does in a lot of systems, it kind of triggers the system, causes the system to then transfer the grade, transfer the score to the grade book. Now, right now, if we looked at our branch, this is pretty linear. We're just going from one thing to another and ending up in a report. And here's where we can make it interesting. So before the report, I'll add both a wall and a gate. And right after the instructions, I'll add a gate. So I'll hit the plus sign. Let's go back to our page view. Change this to a gate. Now the whole purpose of this gate is just to allow the reset of the questions, because as soon as the learner answers a question, that question is, or makes a decision, the question or the decision is locked. Well, now we're unlocking it. That's the purpose of this gate. We're going to call this a starting gate. So here's our page ID. We're resetting the questions. We're allowing someone to pass through this gate and cause this to happen regardless of their score. So that's why we have a 0, and we're even declaring it allow a student to pass regardless of score. So I check this off, put in 0. And now there are two options here, a pass option and a fail option. They'll always pass because we said allow a student to pass regardless of score. So they'll always go down this branch. And the purpose of this branch is simply to go to the next page. That's it. We're done with this gate. That's the point of this gate. I'm going to call this a starting gate, actually. I think that might be a little more clear down the road. Okay, so here are 3 decisions that we have to make. And now well, I was going to put in another gate, and I just changed my mind. I think what I'll do is put in another decision. Are you happy with your score? I think that'll work out much better. So in order for me to really make this clear, or the purpose of this clear, I'm going to add one more page, and I'm going to change this page to a wall. Now let me explain this. There's no way to get to the report by just simply navigating. There's a wall. It prevents us from the student or the learner to go from page to page and then to the report. The only way they're going to get to the report is based on their response to this question. So here is Hector, and he's asking a very simple question. Are you happy with your results? And your response as the learner is, yes, I'd like to report my score. Or, not at all. Let me try again. And so, there's no point value here, so we'll ensure that, everything has a nice fat 0, because we don't want that to affect our total score at all. This is a simple decision as to, are you ready to report, or do you want to try again? Now, if you're ready to report, notice, you remember we had titled our report page report. So we're going to jump to that page now. There it is. So every page has a serial code, a unique ID, but this is, so this is kind of machine readable, and this is human readable report. So it was simply putting report in the page ID that caused this to happen. So we're going to jump to this page. No, not at all. Well, we're going to jump to the page, yeah, but which page? We could go back to the instructions or the starting gate. Either or would work fine. And you could even explain what's happening here. You could even, have some feedback, and you could say, let's try again then, or something like that. And since it's very, very short, maybe you can branch after 3 seconds. It's generally not a good idea. It's generally branch when the next button is clicked, but this is so short, people aren't going to have any trouble with that at all. Okay, great. So now let's see what happens when we run this. So LodeStar is acting like a server now. It's kind of serving up this page, just as if this were a learning management system. So there we go. There's our course design. Here's our table of contents, 1 page out of 10. We have our video, and we can go ahead and, we can play our video. Okay. So we have our instructions, and then here's okay, so we'll go ahead. What sorts of technologies? Oh, we didn't get a very, now that we didn't get a perfect score, we got 5, and now this is rolled back. The students are K-12 teachers. What do we want these? Let's choose what topics. Okay, we get a bit of a boost, and then we'll just go ahead and pick something here. Are you happy with your results? No, not at all. Let me try again. And back to instructions. That was our branch. We jumped to the page that was titled instructions, and these things are reset now. Who are the students? So the reason why we need them to be reset, let's say we're here on the 2nd and we went back, well, we can't, this is locked. The way this got unlocked was through our starting gate. That was its purpose. Okay, what do we want these teachers to do? That's maybe a great thing. And then finally, after completing the course, well, we definitely need to start thinking about assessments. Well, we did a lot better this time. So are you happy with your results? Yeah, I'm happy with them. And I jump to the report. Now this is actually being reported to the learning management system, but of course we're not really connected to a learning management system yet. Now, I'll add a couple of other things. So we're nearly done, but I thought I'd do 2 things. One is show you how we can change Hector's expression. So after the report, I'm going to add another wall. So I'll go ahead and just build myself a wall. And I'm going to have some resources. So I'll add a page, and then I'll just change this to text page. So basically, I've walled off some resources. And my resources in this case are going to be a bit of an image library. I'll choose a widget for this. And I'll scroll down and use the image layout. It's a widget. And let's bring in a couple of things here. So let's start off with, well, if you did well, we're going to cause Hector to smile. So I'll go ahead and I'll just give this an ID, smile. I'll add a page here, add another page to the widget. And let's bring in Oh, let's maybe stunned. Okay. So Hector's going to have a stunned look if we do something terrible. All right, so what we've done so far is we just have a couple of images, and so this allows you to add more images. This changes the order of the images. This is how you would navigate from image to image. Each image is identified right here. The smile, stunned. There they are. Incidentally, if you were just adding this to a page and maybe you wanted some space around, you can really change the layout of these things. It's a pretty powerful widget. It's called the image layout widget. But the key thing is that we gave each of these images an ID. Now we'll go back and let's just use the very first one to demonstrate this, okay? So here's the first question. Who are the students? Well, that's a good thing to answer. But let's say that you chose, let's say you chose this. Will this be a classroom or hybrid class? Strictly, will this class be a hybrid? I have this, this is incorrect language, but that's okay. This is a bad, yeah, let's choose technologies instead. Okay, what sorts of technologies? We're going to give them a stunned look if you answered that. The way we do that is through options, and we go to execute commands. And essentially what we're going to do is change the image here. But before we do that, I'm going to go back to Hector. I'm going to right click on him and give that image an ID. This is totally arbitrary, although I am beginning with, I'm ensuring that this doesn't start with a number. So just a simple word like this. I could have said Hector neutral, something like that. So image ID is neutral. And then if we answer what sorts of technologies, I am going to go and execute a command. And the command is, by the way, I could simply type in the command here, change image. Well, which image are we changing? We're changing the image that has a neutral ID. So you got to make sure that the ID is very specific to the image. And what are we changing it to? Well, stunned. Now I also have a full-featured editor here. So for example, if I mistype something, let's say I didn't use a proper function and I tested it, it's saying execution error, change image is not a function. Well, how do you know what's a function and what's not a function? Well, you could go to help here, and help lists all the functions. You could start with that. By the way, I like what I have now, so I'll just save and close. Change image neutral is done. And I'll save that. Now, the other place you can go to is help, scripting functions, which gives you a new tab and then a very thorough article on all of the different things you can do in the script editor. Introduces the script editor, introduces the language. So this this is essentially very JavaScript-like, but with some high-level functions which are specific to LodeStar. So this, just going to help and scripting functions will get you there. Okay, so once again, when you click on what sorts of technologies, this will execute. Your feedback will still display. Now, notice my syntax. I have the name of a function, and I paid attention to what was uppercase, or optionally everything, if you just keep everything lowercase in terms of the function name. So this is like a command. Change images, do this, change the image. Change what image? Change the neutral image. That's what they call the first argument. And that's in quotes, separated by a comma. I know that's difficult to see. So we have neutral in quotes, comma, stunned in quotes, right parens, parentheses, and then a semicolon. So that is, you can see this a little clearer here. So that's, essentially that's the pattern of invoking or calling a function. You got to have the right function, the right name, and the right, what they call arguments. So something, comma, something in this case. And where you find out all, how you learn that is through that article or through, asking for help inside the editor. Just, this tells you everything. In this case, change image. You can see that. If it drives you crazy to remember what should be capitalized, then just change image all lowercase. The current image and then the new image ID, and this explains that we're looking for the image ID. Okay, so now if we preview, let's take a look and see what happens when we select the technologies option. So once again, LodeStar is operating like a server, serving up this page locally, essentially. And you can, this little progress bar means that it's, shows you the progress of loading the resources, loading those images. And then okay, so here we are. Here's our first question. And we're going to go ahead and change the technologies. As soon as we submit, there's Hector. He's stunned. And that's because because of that choice, we've now executed that function. Now, the change image is just one out of many, many, many functions, things that you can do. I kept it simple there just to get your feet wet with the use of functions. So now, one last thing to kind of just make this a little, now, I talked about, if you wanted to get rid of the meter, you could. Also, we have kind of the accessible version. If there are things here that you want to get rid of, then you would simply go to Tools, Project Settings. So for the display interview meter, you can hide that by selecting false. The display ADA icon, you could shut that off if you wanted to. It's not a good idea. You can hide the page numbers. You can hide the navigation, left arrow, right arrow, hide the transcript icon, which you have a running transcript of the decisions that the learner has made. Here we've hidden notes automatically, but if you want the student to be able to take notes, you go turn that to false. Now, I'll go ahead and commit those changes. And then finally, I'll go to my tools and layouts. And I'm going to choose the Metro layout here. And one picture is worth 1,000 words. You can kind of get a thumbnail, a little idea of what it's going to look like. And usually when I change, this is not always true, but if I change the layout, oftentimes under themes, there's a theme that matches that layout. You can, now I've chosen the Metro layout, I'm changing the theme to the Metro theme. And of course, I can change any of the parameters of the theme, but here's what it looks like out of the box now. So we kind of get a little bit of a different look and feel. For one, as soon as all the resources are loaded, this particular layout is going to make the full use of this page. So you can see here, now there's kind of a limit. It won't, if you had like a really large screen, we kind of restrict the maximum width. But you can see here, we've really made use of the full page. And you get the table of contents laid out here. You can still hide the table of contents if you wanted to. Here's your transcript. Here's your page level accessibility. And this is an alternative version of this whole activity. So you can see here, we've got a different styling for our buttons. We chose to continue to display the meter, but we could have hidden the meter. And now let's cause Hector to be stunned. Thank you, Hector. And there we go. I'm just going to randomly select things. Are you happy? Well, I didn't get a very good score, but yes, I'd like to report my score. And there we go. So that concludes our presentation of decision-making scenarios using the interview page type. And in a future video, I will show you how you can freeform it. You can create a decision-making scenario by just laying out widgets on a screen. But that's for another time. Thank you so much for joining me.